I never thought I'd be standing here, watching my childhood home being auctioned off to the highest bidder. The grand Victorian mansion where I once slept in the garage while my brother Marcus lounged in his private suite. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. My name is Oliver Chen, and this is the story of how I went from sleeping on a garage floor to owning the very house my parents used to torment me with. It all started 15 years ago when I turned 16. Until then, I'd shared a small bedroom with my younger brother Marcus. It wasn't ideal, but it was home. That all changed when Dad's company started taking off. Suddenly, our modest house wasn't good enough anymore. They bought this massive Victorian mansion in the most expensive part of town. 5 bedrooms, a pool, and a 3-car garage. I still remember the day we moved in. Mom was practically floating as she gave us the tour. And this, she announced, opening a door to reveal a massive bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, is Marcus's suite. Marcus, 14 at the time, immediately claimed the space, running around like he owned the place. I stood in the doorway, waiting to see my room. That's when Dad cleared his throat. "Oliver," he said, his voice oddly stiff, "you'll be staying in the garage." I thought he was joking. The garage? But one look at his face told me he was serious. "We need the other bedrooms," Mom explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your father's business partners often stay over, and Marcus needs space for his music." Marcus's music consisted of occasionally strumming a guitar he'd begged for but never learned to play properly. Meanwhile, I was maintaining straight A's while working part-time at a local electronics store. The garage was exactly what you'd expect: cold, damp, and smelling of motor oil. They set up a fold-out cot in the corner, behind Dad's precious Mercedes. "We'll renovate it soon," Mom promised. They never did. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of the garage door opening as Dad left for work. In winter, the temperature would drop so low I could see my breath. I'd wrap myself in every blanket I owned, trying to stay warm while listening to Marcus play video games in his heated suite above. But I didn't just survive in that garage, I thrived. I turned it into my sanctuary. Between the cars, I set up a small desk I'd rescued from a neighbor's trash. I studied there late into the night, using the dim light from a cheap lamp I'd bought with my own money. The cold taught me resilience, the solitude gave me focus, and the humiliation fueled my determination. While Marcus was given everything: private tutors, expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, I worked. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account I kept secret from my family. They never asked where I worked or what I did with my money. To them, I was just the disappointment who lived in the garage. Oliver's always been different. I'd overhear Mom telling her friends at their fancy dinner parties. "Not ambitious like Marcus. You know, he actually likes living in the garage. Says it gives him independence." She'd laugh, and her friends would join in, all of them sipping expensive wine in the warmth of the house while I huddled under blankets just feet away. The turning point came during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. Not that my parents knew. They were too busy celebrating Marcus's acceptance into the local community college. The night before I left for college, Dad called me into his study. The room was massive, with leather-bound books he'd never read and awards he'd bought to impress clients. "Oliver," he said, not looking up from his computer, "your mother and I have been talking. We think it's best if you don't come back during breaks." I stood there, letting his words sink in. "The garage will be needed for storage," he continued, still not meeting my eyes. "And frankly, it doesn't look good having you here. Marcus is starting to build connections and, well, you understand." I did understand. I understood perfectly. "Of course," I replied calmly. "I won't be coming back." He finally looked up, surprised by my easy agreement. For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. But then he just nodded and went back to his computer. That was the last real conversation I had with my father for 15 years. I left for MIT the next morning. No one came to say goodbye. I took everything I owned, which wasn't much, and walked out of that garage without looking back. My secret savings account held exactly $15,482.63, every dollar earned while living among the motor oil and winter frost. What my family didn't know was that I'd been doing more than just working retail. Those long nights in the garage hadn't just been spent studying. I'd been teaching myself programming, developing apps, and building a client base for freelance web development. By the time I left for college, I had already launched 2 successful mobile apps under a pseudonym. At MIT, I flourished. Without the constant reminder of my family's disdain, I could finally focus entirely on my goals. I graduated early, top of my class, with job offers from every major tech company in Silicon Valley. But I had different plans. Remember those apps I developed in the garage? They were just the beginning. During college, I'd expanded my tech portfolio, investing every spare dollar into development. By graduation, my company, Garage Start Tech, was worth $5 million, though it wasn't public knowledge who owned it. I rented a small apartment in San Francisco, living well below my means while my company grew. Every time I was tempted to buy something expensive, I remembered the cold nights in the garage and put the money into my business instead. Years passed. I heard bits and pieces about my family through distant relatives. Marcus had dropped out of college, but Mom and Dad kept supporting him. They bought him a small mansion next door, paid for his failed business ventures, covered his gambling debts. All while my father's company expanded, riding the wave of a booming economy. Then came 2008. The financial crisis hit like a tsunami, and my father's company wasn't prepared. He'd overleverage everything, taking out massive loans to maintain their lavish lifestyle and cover Marcus's mounting debts. When the market crashed, it all came crumbling down. I watched from afar as they desperately tried to keep up appearances. The fancy cars started disappearing one by one. Marcus's mansion was sold at a loss. Mom's social media posts became less frequent, no more photos of expensive vacations or designer shopping sprees. Then I saw the notice. Their house, my old house, was going up for auction. The same house where I'd spent 2 years sleeping in the garage. The same garage where I'd built the foundation of my now $100 million tech company. Standing here now, watching potential buyers mill around the property, I feel strangely calm. Nobody recognizes me. Why would they? The Oliver they knew was just the boy from the garage. Now I'm CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies in Silicon Valley, though my name rarely appears in the press. I adjust my simple black suit, bought off the rack at Macy's, and wait for the auction to begin. Through the crowd, I spot them, Mom, Dad, and Marcus, standing together looking shell-shocked. They haven't noticed me yet. They have no idea that the son they banished to the garage has returned, checkbook in hand, ready to buy back every cold night, every humiliation, every dismissive glance. The auctioneer steps up to the podium, and I take a deep breath. It's time to show my family exactly what the boy from the garage has become. The auction room crackled with tension as the auctioneer began his introduction. My parents huddled together near the front, Mom clutching Dad's arm like a lifeline. Marcus stood slightly apart, his designer clothes now looking worn and dated. None of them had spotted me yet. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer's voice boomed through the room. We're here today for the sale of 1447 Highland Avenue, a Victorian mansion with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a 3-car garage. He emphasized the word garage, and I couldn't help but smile. The bidding started at $2 million, less than half what my parents had paid for it. I watched as a few hands went up tentatively. My father's face grew paler with each bid, watching his precious mansion being haggled over like a yard sale item. $2.5 million, called out a man in an expensive suit. $2.7, countered a woman near the window. I waited patiently, letting them drive up the price. My hand stayed down, my expression neutral. Years of hiding my success had made me an expert at being invisible when needed. $3.2 million, the man in the suit again. Mom was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. Marcus had pulled out his phone, probably trying to look uninterested, but his hands were shaking. $3.5 million, said the woman by the window. The room fell silent. The auctioneer looked around, his gavel raised. $3.5 million going once. I raised my hand. $5 million. The room gasped. My voice, clear and confident, cut through the silence like a knife. For the first time in 15 years, my parents turned and looked directly at me. The recognition wasn't immediate. They saw a man in a simple but well-tailored suit, standing with the quiet confidence that only true success can bring. Then Mom's eyes widened. Dad's jaw dropped. Marcus actually took a step backward. Oliver? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I kept my eyes on the auctioneer. $5 million, cash offer, no contingencies. I can close immediately. The auctioneer, sensing the drama but maintaining his professionalism, looked around the room. $5 million. Going once. Going twice. The man in the expensive suit shook his head slightly. The woman by the window had already gathered her things. Sold. To the gentleman in the black suit. I walked to the front of the room, pulling out my checkbook. My parents stood frozen, watching as I wrote out a check for $5 million with the same casual ease they once used to dismiss me to the garage. Oliver, Dad finally managed to speak. How? Where did you? I handed the check to the auction manager. I believe you'll find everything in order. I'd like to take possession immediately. Of course, sir. We can handle the paperwork right now. Mom stepped forward, her hand reaching out but not quite touching me. Oliver, sweetheart, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? I turned to face them fully for the first time. Tell you what, that the sum you banished to the garage built a $100 million tech company, that every cold night, every humiliation, every dismissal only made me work harder? Would you have cared? Marcus snorted, trying to maintain his facade of indifference. $100 million? Yeah, right. If you're so rich, why are you wearing a cheap suit? I smiled, pulling out my phone and pulling up my company's website, Garage Start Tech. Look it up. I named it that to remind myself where I came from. Where you put me. Dad's face went from pale to ashen as recognition dawned. Garage Start Tech was all over the financial news lately. Our latest app had revolutionized the industry. He probably read about us, never knowing his garage rolling son was the CEO. That's your company, he stammered. Yes. Built from nothing, in your garage, while Marcus was playing guitar in his heated suite. I turned to the auction manager. Is there somewhere private where we can complete the paperwork? Oliver, wait. Mom stepped forward again. We're about to be homeless. Surely you wouldn't. We're family. I paused, letting her words hang in the air. Family? Was I family when you put me in the garage? When you told me not to come home from college? When you never once called or checked on me for 15 years? Tears welled up in her eyes. We were wrong. We see that now. Please. The garage is still there, I said quietly. It's quite spacious, as I recall. Good for building a business. Good for building character. Dad's face darkened. You're really going to throw your own parents out on the street? After everything we did for you? I couldn't help but laugh. Everything you did for me? You gave me a garage and cold nights and endless reminders that I wasn't good enough. And you know what? You were right. I wasn't good enough. I was better. I turned back to the auction manager, but then stopped. You know, it's interesting. All those years in the garage, I kept thinking you'd realize how wrong you were. That you'd apologize, invite me back into the house, be actual parents. But you never did. You were too busy buying Marcus mansions and covering his gambling debts. Marcus flinched. How did you know about? I know everything. Every loan, every failed business, every credit card bill they paid for you. I've been watching, waiting, wondering if any of you would ever change. But you didn't. You just kept taking and taking until there was nothing left to take. Mom was openly sobbing now. Please, Oliver, we'll do anything. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. There's a small apartment building on Oak Street. Not fancy, but clean and well-maintained. I own it. There's a 2-bedroom unit available. The lease agreement is in here, along with enough cash for 6 months' living expenses. They stared at the envelope, then at me. You're not sleeping in my garage, I continued. But you're not sleeping on the street either. Consider it a chance to start over. To learn what it's like to live without everything being handed to you. Dad reached for the envelope with trembling hands. Oliver, don't thank me. This isn't forgiveness. This is me being better than you were. You have until the end of the week to move out of the mansion. The apartment will be ready tomorrow. I signed the final papers for the house and walked out, leaving them standing in the auction room. As I reached my car, a modest hybrid, not a Mercedes, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Marcus. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I was a spoiled brat. I never thought about what it was like for you in that garage. I studied my brother's face, seeing for the first time not the golden child who could do no wrong, but a man who had never learned to stand on his own feet. The apartment has 2 bedrooms, I said. Stay with them, help them adjust. Learn to live within your means. Maybe then we can talk about being family again. He nodded, understanding the opportunity I was offering. As I drove away from the auction house, I thought about that garage. Tomorrow, I'd have contractors there to transform it into a state-of-the-art home office, a place where other young entrepreneurs could come to work, to dream, to build their own success stories. Because sometimes the worst places, the coldest spaces, the darkest corners are where the brightest futures are born. I know that better than anyone. After all, I'm the boy from the garage who came back to buy the mansion. The next morning, I stood in my new home office, the former garage, looking at the space where my cot used to be. The contractors would arrive soon to begin the renovation. But for now, it was exactly as I remembered it. Cold, dark, full of potential. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Mom and Dad are settled in the apartment. It's small but clean. Thank you. I didn't respond. They had their fresh start, and I had mine. The garage that was meant to break me had instead made me. And now, standing here in this space that held so many painful memories, I finally felt something I'd never expected. Peace. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about causing pain. It's about rising so far above it that those who hurt you become nothing more than a story you tell about where you started. A story about a garage, a determined teenager, and a $5 million auction that changed everything.